Welcome to this meeting of Carpinteria Birdwatchers for, what day is today? Thursday, January something, 20th, 2022. I see a pretty good group, pretty good sized group. A lot of people have their video off, which is fine. Good to see people showing up for these meetings. Fun to get together and talk about birds. So the topic for tonight's meeting is becoming a better birder, which is sort of a grab bag to talk about different aspects of birding. And I'm relatively poorly prepared for this meeting. I don't have a presentation to show you. But on the plus side, we do have Rebecca Coulter, who has graciously agreed to be our special guest. So everyone say hello to Rebecca. Rebecca is a longtime teacher of bird watching. She leads bird watching classes in Santa Barbara. And so it's really great to have her here. Before we jump in and get going, does anyone have any exciting birding to report, things they've been up to since our last meeting? You're all being very quiet, which is fine. Okay, so not hearing anyone else sharing anything. Rebecca wants to share. Yes, Rebecca, please go ahead.
If you have not been to the Botanic Garden in the last few weeks, it's superb up there right now. It's so beautiful right now. And it's full on spring, busting out all over. It's really gorgeous up there. I did a walk on Tuesday, and it's definitely worth a little trip up there right now.
Is that sort of the place that you do your classes these days? I see lists from there a lot of the time, but not, I guess not just there.
I do a monthly walk there, usually the second or third Tuesday of the month. My classes through the museum are a different place every week. Sometimes we do go to the garden with that class, sometimes not.
Gotcha.
The white-throated sparrow is still there. We had 6 species of sparrow in the lower meadow right to start. So it was really awesome. It was a really great day.
And that's kind of right when you come in the entrance, that meadow that kind of stretches up the slope to your right.
I don't care that there's people there. They're just in abundance right there. It's amazing.
Yeah, I always get.
It was right after, I guess it was kind of wet on Monday night. And so everything was out, like moving around, foraging frantically in the sort of clear weather. It was great.
Yeah, I always get very excited when I see a white-throated sparrow. You know, yeah. I realize that in other parts of the country, maybe they're more common, but around here, it's a very special bird. So I just get a thrill out of seeing them. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but you have a hand up. You want Paul? Oh, Paul. Yeah. Hey.
Yeah. Hey, how you doing there, John? Good to see you.
Yeah.
So I went out to the Santa Cruz Islands last week with my son here and was entertained by their scrub jays. Now, are the island scrub jays different than the ones we have on the mainland?
Yeah, they absolutely are. They are an endemic species. I think they're the only island endemic in North America. I think I've heard. Like it is. If you want to see that species of bird, you have to go to Santa Cruz Island. There's nowhere else you can see them.
Yeah, they're very pesky here too. They're well trained at coming around the campsites and really pestering you. So they're quite well human trained, just like the island foxes are too. Same thing.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, if you're a birder who's very focused on your list, you know, there's a steady stream of people going out there specifically to see that bird.
Yeah,
and I'm sure the island packers, the folks who have the concession to take people back and forth, were very happy when that split happened, which was, you know, a few years back. Yeah, they're neat. And it's interesting to me that they, you know, that little gap. I mean, it's not that far offshore, but that's enough for them to speciate. Like they just don't cross that channel. You know, that population is isolated enough that they've diverged over you know, a long period of time. Okay, anything else people want to share before we jump in? Again, you know, because I don't have a presentation to show you, you know, a series of slides, I may share my screen a little bit here and there, but for the most part, it's going to be just us talking. So I think even more than usual, I'm fine with people kind of jumping in with questions. You can just unmute and if you and ask a question if something sparks an observation or a question from you. And if it becomes an issue, maybe I'll try and rein people in a little bit. But as it stands, you're all very good about keeping quiet. I think we all have our Zoom etiquette down. At this point, we've done so much Zooming that we can kind of manage the meeting collectively without a heavy hand. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this topic of becoming a better birder, and the idea that kind of informed that for me was a recognition I've had that everybody does bird watching for their own reasons. So, I think the idea of what it even means to be a better birder is personal. Some people want to do one sort of thing. They get something out of it. Other people want something different. And especially since I know, Rebecca, you've had a lot of experience talking to a lot of people about improving as bird watchers, leading those classes. I'm really curious what your sense is of the range of reasons that people birdwatch, or what do you think of when you think of what it means to be a better birder? What do you see reflected out there in the people you talk to?
I think sometimes my observations are obviously informed by my own interests, but I think for the most part, it's people wanting to connect with nature in a way that offers them a different, not to make a pun, but through a different lens, through a different angle. And for my personal journey into birding, it was definitely that. And it connected me not only to nature in general, but specifically to the nature of my location, where I am, and how everything is connected to everything else. And it was a way to get to that. I think the people that I come in contact with, particularly at the Botanic Garden walks, they might be people who aren't birders other than maybe when they are traveling once a year, or they don't actively pursue it. I think that it's something that people might seek as a sort of directed way to explore a place. And for me personally, it's that connection to nature and how all the parts of it are related. And birding at the garden is, for me, a total joy, because you have the opportunity to connect every bird sighting to where they are in the garden, on what plant, and the plants have signs. So it's, it's just a natural, it widens that door a little bit more. So in my experience, yeah, it's people seeking a connection of some kind.
So there's such a diversity of habitats there at the Botanic Garden that, like you say, you've got the sparrows right there at the entrance, or in the meadow area. And in terms of it's a class, right? I mean, the thing you do is presented as a class. And I think when people think about a class, they think about, oh, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to progress. Maybe there's not a test or a grade, but there's some idea of intellectual movement. Like, I'm going to start here and I'm going to get, I'm going to be more knowledgeable or in a different place at the end. What sorts of things do you teach? I mean, when you have those students, or how do you adapt that to the different interests of a diverse group of students?
The garden walks are not necessarily sold as a class. They're a morning bird walk, but my classes through the museum that are longer, 8 weeks, are definitely marketed that way, and I approach it that way. And interestingly, that's interesting that you bring that up, because it's something that I often have to find the right balance. Not talking too much, not yammering on about every moment that we're having, and letting people experience those moments as they might when they're on their own or with fewer people. And because I think the real power of it is pointing out and getting people to stop what they might naturally be doing. For me personally, to stop moving and stop talking, shut it down and just listen. That's one of the most powerful things that I find I can do for myself. I like to offer people that opportunity to do that, because in this life, we are seldom still. I am. I find myself always fidgeting, gesturing, doing something. And it's a great opportunity to just really dial it back. And so I am particularly interested in sound and bird sound, and all nature sounds, but bird sound in particular, and giving people permission just to be in a group, not try to fill every moment with sound, and let them just listen differently. That's something that I love teaching. I love having people take away, is that wherever you are, whether it's going out to your car in the morning, or going on a hike, or going to the grocery store, paying attention a little differently, I think is a great gift. And that's what it has taught me. I like to open that door for people.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with my experience, that, awareness is a huge factor, and going into a landscape and listening to what's happening around you is, there's so much there that, if you didn't pay attention to it, you would just miss. It just goes right over my head. But especially if I slow down and take a few minutes, species start to announce themselves, and it's just really fascinating to see that sort of come to life around me, and realize, oh, that's there all the time. I just wasn't noticing it before.
The other thing I like to remind people, and it's sometimes hard to do in some of the places we go, I actually have kind of a physical reality that happens when I'm out birding in a really conscious way. And that is, I like to be aware of my feet connected to the ground, and kind of just almost a meditation, let that whole thing travel up to my awareness up here, and I know that sounds a little bit out there, but it is an awareness that I first discovered the first time I went owling. And I was with people who were professionals they were very skilled at what they were doing. And we were walking around in the mountains late at night with no lights. There was a lot of starlight. Becoming comfortable with that, I had a really overwhelming sense of being completely connected to the earth. And it was a great way for me to kind of get out of my comfort zone and realize that also is a really informative and exciting and thrilling way to experience nature. So I try to bring that to my classes, and occasionally I'll say it once usually and let people do that.
Yeah, I've had similar experiences where I realized that, I would not be out here in these current conditions, in this current location, if not for some, bird related goal that I'm trying to do. I think the latest time I had something like that was the Kachuma Christmas count this year. And I got assigned to be up there on East Pinery Road, up there near Ranger Peak. And there was this bad weather forecast, and it was going to be really windy and raining and snowing. And, so being up on that mountain in wind and rain and snow, it's not something I would normally do, but it was very challenging from a birding standpoint. But it was really cool. It was just really fun to experience that and be out in the midst of it all. And the birds were the only reason I was there doing that. So that definitely hits home with me. I did want to talk about.
Were the birds there too?
There were a few there.
I
think it was probably the shortest list of birds I've ever come up with for that much time and energy spent birding. I think I had 5 or 6 species in 3 hours, but I appreciated the ones that I got. They were very exciting. I wanted to talk about some sort of more conventional ideas that I've had, or that I see other people having, about what it means to become a better birder. I think when we talk about, oh, that person's a really good birder, oh, that person's so good, a lot of time what we're talking about is identification, right? The process of being able to see or hear a bird and correctly identify it to species, or maybe even, beyond, to subspecies or what have you. But, and I think at least for me in my journey as a birder, I'm sometimes at risk of losing sight of everything else and just being focused on that. I'm so focused on the list. I'm so focused on, the last few years on my county year list and trying to get, the next tick up in that number that, after I filled in the easier ones, it's like, okay, now I have to identify those difficult species. Now I really have to be able to go through those first year gulls and find the one that I don't see a lot of, and that's hard, at least for me. And so there's a lot of focus on learning these fine points of identification. And it's interesting to me, like that's a part of how I approach birding, or how I have approached it for the last few years. But it's just one part. And I wonder, Rebecca, do you, like when people come to your when you do the classes through the museum, or even just the outings at the Botanic Garden, is that something that people are specifically looking for, or is it more just, they're there to experience the birds at whatever state they're at, and they're not necessarily looking to learn to be better at identifying them?
I think the garden outings are more varied in terms of why people are there. A lot of people are traveling from out of the area. So they might have had a vague interest in birds, or they might be big birders from another part of the world. And so they're there to kind of capitalize on that. But there are also people who come, they choose not to bring binoculars. They choose not to borrow binoculars. They're there to do some sort of a guided exploration of a place they've heard was beautiful, or that they know is beautiful, or interesting in some way. My classes, my longer classes, they are typically there to kind of absorb identification and tips and tricks, and often I find that for a lot of people, I ask this question all the time. When we go to a location, every location I usually ask, has anyone never been here? And even though a lot of these people have lived in Santa Barbara their whole lives, there are always some hands, people that have never been to Lake Los Carneros, or never been to places I'm very surprised that there are so many people. And so some of them are there to get to explore little pockets of town and see things that they might be able to go back to. But yes, identification dominates classes. And as you were talking, I was thinking, teaching has actually served to help me with that, and to be able to take it from all about identification and growing your list and growing your skills to sharing and getting people to understand the joy that you're getting out of it. That in itself is a real pleasure for me. Obviously, I like to do that. But as I was thinking, I thought, it's also really heightened the identification issue, because so often students are asking, so why is that? How do you know that's a red-tailed hawk? It's way up there. You can't see any red tail. How do you know? So it's all about the ID points, which are great. I love to share those, but it's really good reminder to also really enjoy the California Towhee show that's happening right here, that everybody knows what that is. But let's just take a moment, because I've never seen that, or whatever.
Yeah. I always remember, it's a lesson I have to relearn myself, that early on, like as a teenager, as a birder, I was very focused on it as as birding, as this active, pursuit of the list and the count of species. And I got burnt out on it, and I stopped doing it. And it was, introducing bird watching to my wife that, who was a beginning birder, that reminded me, like, oh no, this is really fun. Like the species that I identify, the juncos, in the parking lot, are actually really cool and deserve to be looked at, beyond the point of just going, oh, dark-eyed junco, okay, moving on to the next thing.
Most of you probably have had this experience when you go to the grocery store and there's something cool happening in the parking lot, like the crows are mobbing and massing to go up to roost for the night or something. And you see someone stop and pay attention to that, I can almost not stop myself from talking about how cool that is. And did you know, I have to all through when I wasn't teaching during last 2 years. Oh my God, I was like interpreting birding. I was teaching birding in the grocery store and everywhere I could, because I found that I missed that so much of connecting with people around a bird moment, so it's really nice to be back to it and sharing that.
Yeah. I know for me, starting Carpinteria Birdwatchers or being part of the group outings and these meetings, it added so much to my own enjoyment of the activity, because it was the fun of sharing it. It was, this thing that's really fun for me individually, but it can be even more fun to see other people have that experience.
I just have to jump in. Last night, my husband and I were walking up in a nearby neighborhood, and the white-crowned sparrows, you've probably seen this in your neighborhoods, at dusk, they go up to a roost spot and you hear this cacophony, just
They're so loud
noise of trying to sort out where everybody's going to roost for the night, and you're in my space and get out of my, all that kind of jockeying around that they do. And we were walking up a street, and in several bottle brush trees along the street, we could hear this happening. And as we walked by one tree, there was a woman who was standing, just sort of like standing out in the middle of the street with her phone. And we didn't say anything to her. I was really tempted to, start going on about what that is, making that sound. But we just walked by. And then after, both of us said, I wonder if she was just noticing that for the first time. I wonder if that was just that moment for her when she realized, may not have known what was going on, but clearly something was happening. And so it's cool to see somebody else doing that.
She was using her Merlin and trying to figure out what the sound was.
The Merlin sound ID, yeah.
Andy, oh my gosh, I just used that for the first time 2 days ago, because all my students have been saying, oh, you got to try this, you got to try this. And I did it, and I was astonished. There was a towhee at my office that was chinking, and in the background, not too far away, but there was a Anna's hummingbird display call, that super loud chirp that they do at the end of the dive. And it picked up both of those. It picked up the Anna's hummingbird in the background, which I was kind of surprised. So yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it is a really powerful tool, and I think really helps in terms of, for you, I assume, and for someone who's been doing it for long enough, especially in one specific locality, you learn, most of the vocalizations, so what's making those sounds. But it takes a while to get there, and if you're not there yet, it can be really helpful to have, those things identified for you and give you an idea what to look for.
Another tool that I've been using lately, I'm planning and kind of thinking about how to structure a new class that I'm going to be offering at the Botanic Garden on birding by ear. And just I think I'm going to do it a couple of times, but it'd just be one session. But how to cram in a lot of information into a short session. But going through the process of how you would describe and start from the beginning with somebody, how to start recognizing and how to not be overwhelmed with all the sound that starts coming in when you start listening. It's a good practice to kind of think about how you might do that with someone new. And it's a good exercise.
Well, maybe I can participate in that class. I would love to go out there with you and hear you talk about the bird sounds. So I wanted to talk about a few other aspects of, as I was thinking about what does it mean to be a better birder, and not just the identification, but other ways one might sort of, progress or plot a course of improvement that might mean something to different people. One thing I thought about was the idea of birding ethics and the idea of being a better birder in the sense of being a more ethical birder. Or it's something I've worked at myself, just to, again, try to have a better appreciation of the impacts that my own birding has on other people, and also on the birds themselves. I did want to share something really quick, and I think maybe I will share my screen to show this. And there's a link to this in the description for the YouTube video where we're going to be archiving this. and in the blog post at carpbirdwatchers.org. But this is the American Birding Association's Code of Birding Ethics. And I'm not going to go through it in detail, but I just want to, let people know that it is out there, and it's I think really worth looking over if you haven't looked at it before. It has a lot of just interesting aspects of ethical implications of different things you might do or not do while birding that are definitely worth thinking about. And I'm not pointing this out to be school marmy and say, oh no, you must not do this or you must do that, because again, everybody approaches birding for their own reasons and in their own way, and they have different levels of concern about these things. But I think it is really helpful to at least inform yourself about it. And so I wanted to mention that code of ethics. And I'm curious, Rebecca, as part of your outreach, does the subject of ethical birding come up, or what sorts of things do you feel it's important to convey to people?
Well, I think the main thing, like anything in life, I think respect has to live right at the very top of that. And that trickles out to every part of it. And one of the things that comes up often in my classes, and I set up right from the beginning, is birding with a group is hard. Birding with a group, you're a big animal, you're moving around at different paces. And at the very, very start, you have to respect each other's space, where you are in the group, fall back if you've been at the front the whole time, try to be as respectful of each other, and never take for granted or think everything about what's going on with that person. I have never failed to be surprised by what people bring to the experience when we're out together. And I just think it's a great way to start. You start out with a group, always respecting each other's, especially now when I've had to sort of hammer it into people to remember to be aware of not being right on top of each other, and just being respectful. This is not the place to get into it with people. So but one thing that comes up regularly, because I make a point of talking about it, and that is using playback and doing things to elicit a response in birds. And whether it's just sort of, getting something to pop up out of a shrub, which I do judiciously, or actually using playback to get a bird to come in and investigate what's happening. I am very, very cautious. I almost never use playback in any volume that could be heard by the birds I'm around. I will use it, I'll cluster the group together and use it to, for instance, we get to enjoy hermit thrush all winter long, but okay, it's March, it's beginning to be early April. Let me play this for you because this is what you want to listen for. This is the song they start singing as they warm up to go to their breeding grounds. And if you're listening, there is nothing like this sound in the world. It's just the most beautiful song. So I will do that with classes, but I'm really careful to, well, maybe not admonish, but to just tell people when they are using recordings, when they're out in the field, to be very, very cautious. It's a big topic. A lot of people think it has absolutely no impact at all, but I've had the experience where I had been listening to something and a bird came in and just, clearly was reacting. That's an energy expense on the bird's part, and that's risky for a bird to come in and expend that energy and check out something that actually has no threat. So I'm just very cautious about it, and I like to tell people, if you're using it, don't stand out there and during breeding season and play the breeding songs of X species without thinking about it, because the presumption is that that sound is either a threat or competition, and they're going to come right in and react to it. And that's not something that I want to do as a birder, as an observer.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, obviously. I've talked about this in previous meetings more than once, and my own journey as a birder has been to do less playback, and I'm at the point now where I don't even pish. I don't do the attractant sounds really. I don't object to other people making a different choice, but certainly I encourage people to think about the implications and to consider that, at least the way I look at it is I'm bothering the birds already. I'm out in their habitat, galumphing along. They're reacting to my presence. They're doing things other than they would be doing if I weren't there. And maybe I can, at least avoid doing extra on top of that. And certainly when you see the results you get, I mean, there's a reason why people use playback or even, pishing, because it works. It produces a response on the part of the bird. So yeah, I think that's a really good perspective to offer to people so that everybody can kind of be mindful of what they're doing.
I just want to mention another thing. I have one of my pet peeves is trying to bird around off-leash dogs where they are not allowed. And it's something that I have to like squash down the desire to like go off about it with the person. But I had an experience at East Beach one time where the person had an off-leash dog and the dog was having a lot of fun chasing the gulls off of their rest. And I was really all set to let this person have it. And I tried to dial it back and I said, it's really important. The birds are here for a reason. It's really important that they rest because they spend all day foraging at sea and, they're not just gathered here to make a mess or do anything. And she was dumbfounded. It never had occurred to her that her dog was doing anything more than just having fun. It never entered her mind. And she was mortified and she thanked me for saying, thank you for pointing that out because I wasn't even thinking about that. And it was a good reminder to me to not like start being kind of pissed off first, but dial it back and use it as an opportunity. But it was
well, I'm impressed. I mean, I became much more conscious of this following the snowy plovers that nested at Carpinteria State Beach this last summer, and just seeing how they reacted to people, and especially people with dogs. And but I'm impressed that you were able to address this in a way that had that positive outcome, because it is so easy. Like, I think, at least for me, for me to go ahead and approach somebody to talk to them about their dog, I have to kind of gear myself up for that. And I'm already tense and I'm already stressed about it. And that just can spiral in the wrong direction and they can become defensive. Yeah, and Andrea, I know you have a lot of experience with that at the salt marsh. Do you have any perspective you want to offer on that?
Every now and again, somebody almost hits me.
It's hard.
I mean, like I said, you just take deep breaths to calm down.
Yeah.
Sort of center yourself, bring it out of your anger in your head and bring it down to the ground.
Yeah.
And get a calm voice and talk to them. Like she said, she talked to those people and I've talked to some people on the beach. I wasn't in the place where the plovers were, but there was, some big groups of gulls and terns that were on the beach. And I talked to some people about their dogs. Well, we have a situation where we can say, well, this part of the beach is closed and these birds need to have a place to rest. But you can take your dog down to the other side of the beach after Ash Avenue and let them run there. And they thanked me. I don't know that they actually were going to do anything, but it was nicer.
Yeah, I do think it's helpful if there can be some accommodation. I'm down here in San Diego and I was birding on a previous visit at a place called Robb Field, and it's down there near SeaWorld, and there's a river that comes in and a big long estuary. And I saw there were like people with dogs like running all around in there. And I'm thinking, wow, that's got to be really disturbing the birds. But a little more research, I realized like, oh, this is the designated dog beach. You know, that people really want to have a place they can take their dogs that's a beach. And by having a place they can do it, it probably makes it a lot easier to, you know, police other places and prevent there being dogs everywhere. So the birds can, you know, adjust accordingly. And, you know, it's
I mean,
tricky.
John,
Yeah, yeah.
Salt Marsh today, and I saw a number of people with dogs. And, you know, there is so much general hostility between people these days and animosity. I really hesitate to tell somebody, you know, dogs aren't allowed. And I walked out and I did see the sign again that said no dogs, you know, and
At every entrance.
yeah. And I just didn't really know. Now, should I say something or shouldn't I? I mean, under others, you know, if I'm on seal watch, it would not be a big deal. That would be my job to do that. But as one resident approaching somebody else and saying, excuse me, but dogs aren't allowed. And you can just imagine what they're going to say to you. I mean, I don't think.
I've always taken my dog through here. I've been living here for 30, 40 years for all my life, and I've always taken my dogs through here.
Yeah, exactly.
We're talking about it. I mean, you know, the more people tell them, the more they might realize. I was thinking, well, what could we do? We could take pictures of them and put them in the newspaper and say, this person is a, you know,
An angry dog owner calling you right now, Andrea. Carol, did you have something you wanted to add there?
A question. I've seen parents watching their children chase the birds, and
Yeah.
I love it. Great.
yeah, I mean, I'm a mom. I wouldn't let my children do that, but or my grandchildren, but I am non-confrontational, and I think Amrita has a good point about the way people are these days, particularly about their children, also about their dogs, I'm sure.
Exactly. About their dogs.
They
Yeah.
think of more kindly than their children sometimes.
Yeah.
I think.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
It's obviously really hard. And, you know, I have the same experience. I'll be out birding especially at a beach, seems to be, you know, and there's a big gull flock on the beach and I'm excited. I'm going to go up there. I'm going to get to sift through that, you know, flock of 50 or 60 gulls. And then I see a person with a toddler is like between me and the gulls. I'm like, oh no. And I lose my opportunity, or I get to look at them in flight is what I get to do because the toddler just goes running in. And, you know, one thing I try to tell myself in that situation is, well, you know, maybe that experience that toddler is having, as unfortunate as it is for those individual gulls, maybe that's the spark of a lifelong love of nature or an appreciation of these amazing beings swirling into the sky. I don't know how accurate that is, but
I think
it's something I tell myself.
I think you just have to choose the times when it feels like you can step out there and say something if it's right for you. I don't think there's any should you always do it, should you not. You have to be comfortable in the experience. And at that moment on East Beach, I was with a friend and her toddler, who was not chasing the birds because she's a birder. But it was in a way that I could do it without it seeming to be a confrontation. But there are times when I absolutely want nothing to do. I just have to leave the place, unless there's obviously some peril to the bird life or whatnot. But you just have to find the time that it is important to you to step out there.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. I wanted to move on, if I could, to one more, maybe the last topic I wanted to talk about in terms of these different, you know, axes of being a better birder. And that's to kind of talk about something I'm lumping together as like sort of social birding or online birding or sort of goal-oriented birding, this gamification of birding to, and I talked before about, the county year list and how, motivating that has been for me, at the same time that I recognize it's, a silly thing to be obsessing over. But there have been a few sort of interesting things I've noticed just recently that I wanted to share. And I guess I've been doing it for a few years now, enough that I see this happening, and I see it repeating, and I see other people commenting on it, that there's this time, like in January, when the Ebird reviewers kind of get cranky about this because their review queue, like the list of sightings that they have to look at, of the rarities to certify them or, approve them or disconfirm them, gets really big in January because of people like me who are running around, and the birds they were ignoring in December because they already had them for the year list. Now they're all new. So they're out there trying to get all those rarities again. And I saw some comments on the local mailing, the SBCO birding mailing list. There was one by Paul Lehman who was pointing out, look, you could do your 5MR birding, that, sort of the 5 mile radius birding, which is another way of gamifying it. That's not so much the county year list, but focusing in more narrowly about the birds within 5 miles of your location and working on that list. And that's actually a really neat way to, explore locations that are underbirded otherwise. And he was kind of lamenting the crush of people all going to see the same birds, all going to the same spot to see the same continuing rarity. And it, again, I still do it. I've still been running around looking at those rare birds, and I lament the fact that I'm in San Diego this week, so I can't run around and work on my county year list. But I'm curious, Rebecca, what your perspective on that is, or how you feel about, sort of the sort of friendly competition aspect of that kind of birding.
Personally, I have done one year list, the 2000 big year list. I have a life list and a yard list and a county list. So, okay, I'm slightly a lister. I don't, it kind of depends on how much time I have to be birding myself. There are birds that will always call to me, like I'll always go looking for a rare warbler because I really love land birding, and so I would chase that much more than I would chase an Iceland gull, for instance. Gulls are not my thing, but I love the 5 mile radius around your home. In fact, I immediately, after Jamie's comments about that, I immediately went into Ebird and made a 5MR for my pinpoint of my home. And I've pulled in all the hot spots that are known. And now I just want to go and poke around the places that are underbirded, because that's how you make those discoveries of, there's this amazing little pocket park and it has tons of bottlebrush, and oh my gosh, it was full of hummingbirds. I mean, that's how stuff like that happens. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And that's a game of sorts. I don't really, I guess I don't have, people choose to do it or not, depending on what their life is like or what drives them. If it's the check mark in the box, and how many of those you have in a particular day, year, week, whatever life, that's fine, whatever drives them. When I'm birding with people like that, it's hard for me. Because I usually want to stop and wax on about how amazing that ovenbird is. And oh my gosh, look at the way he walks around. He's just, I've seen ovenbird a dozen times, but I want to experience the moment and not check the box and move on. That's just how I'm wired. But I have to say that I think the aspect of the competition, or even just using Ebird, and that is in its own way kind of a daily, not a competition, but it's an activity.
Mind.
And it will, I think it has improved, maybe not the skill set, but the accountability of birding. And I think that's a good thing. I think we've all been on the wrong end of a really bad ID call, and so I think it's improving the quality in some ways.
Yeah, that's an aspect of it that I've found really interesting in terms of my own birding. And, I've ended up, these days I do a lot more photography, not as art, but just as documentation. And it's been hugely helpful for me. And I'm not sure I would have gotten there if it hadn't been the incentive provided by my wanting to get those birds that were harder for me to identify. And as a side effect of that, I got an extensive education in my own propensity to, I really wanted to see that bird and I wasn't familiar with it. And so I sort of upgraded a more common bird into that rarer species. And with the photo, I or a more experienced birder can kind of, double check that and give useful feedback on that. And that's been a huge factor for me in becoming better in terms of the standard of better birder that I use for myself. It's made me a much better birder that way. I still do it. I posted the swamp sparrow at Tecolotido Creek. I was excited to go see that bird and add it to my list, so I went there and right in the right spot, there was a bird. I thought, oh, that's the bird. And I started snapping photos without even really looking at it carefully. And it was only after posting it as the swamp sparrow to my list that I looked at the photo and said, that's a Lincoln sparrow. And it was like a really clearly a Lincoln sparrow. And it just, my psychology at the moment was like, oh, I was ready to make that the swamp sparrow. It was in the right spot. I wanted it to be that. So I made it that.
What's that word? There's a phrase for that, and I always forget it. It's that act of, if you wish it, it will be so. I mean, it's,
I don't know, motivated reasoning or
yeah, I can't remember what it is, but
embarrassing is the word I applied.
Yeah, me too. I'm in there. I did it in front of, like 60 people.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing about Ebird is that you're kind of doing it in front of 60 people or 600 people. But the wonderful thing about Ebird is you can fix it. If you post that on the SPCO birding mailing list, it's out there forever. That's a lot harder to take back. Andrea, you had your hand up.
Sometimes I think that I see something, new and I listed or something that's not real common, but I thought I identified it. But I don't even think I want to go on Ebird because then these people just tell me, well, if I don't take a picture of it, these people just tell me you didn't see it. And so I just don't want to participate.
Yeah, I mean, it can be.
I don't care about listing birds, but I mean, I've gotten to the point where I just don't feel like getting dissed.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. It comes back to what we started with, and that is in terms of ethics. If you don't approach it all with respect, you're just going to alienate everybody. I've had to do that as the coordinator of the CBC. I've had to push people on IDs. It's hard. And I don't want to be that person who squashes their interest. And but the other side of it is I have all these people to vet my decision. And so it's really hard to find that balance, but it really has to come always back to just respect the person and let's figure it out together, Yeah.
Well, I've always been very impressed with, the example that you have set. And I've certainly done my best to try and follow in that path as I, deal with the Carpinteria CBC and kind of dealing with vetting those sightings. And it is hard. And it's, not everybody, necessarily cares on the same level. It's like, or if they saw the bird and they know they saw the bird, it's a lot of work to document that. It's a lot of work if you don't have the photo. And that's, probably part of why I go to the camera even faster than I should these days, when I should be still studying the bird through the binoculars. it's because it just saves me the time and effort of writing up a very detailed description. If I can just
Yeah.
say, oh, there's a photo.
You know, that's one thing that I really miss out on. I don't have the patience to carry a camera, binoculars, a scope, and lead a class. I just can't do all of that at once. And I really wish I had I still could spend some more time with a camera. Because when I have taken photos, like I think it was 2 years ago, maybe last year, the Ebird flycatcher that was down in Arroyo Creek, I took my husband's camera down there because I had a couple of days off after the count. And I said, I'm just going to totally indulge my, photography thing here and try to get pictures of this bird. And boy, did I learn a lot about the bird after the fact. And also during it, oh my God, it's hard to take photos of birds.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing that makes it worthwhile, besides being able to get, more expert birders to give me input on the tricky IDs, is that I can study the photo. It's like when I'm seeing a bird flitting, especially like an Ebird or a little warbler or something, I may get a very quick glimpse of it. But that's not enough for me. I'm not expert enough or familiar enough to know even what to look for in that moment. Whereas if I can freeze it in a photo, I can put it up there on the screen and I can put the field guide next to it and I can say, okay, what about this point? What about this point? And really take my time. And that's really helpful for me. Okay, well, I think that was pretty much what I wanted to talk with you about on this whole broader topic. I mean, there's more we could talk about, but I think this is a pretty good length in terms of our discussion. Do people have just questions either on this topic or more wide-ranging questions for Rebecca before we finish up? Here is your opportunity.
A couple of things I wanted to say. One was, I love taking photographs of birds. But like Rebecca said earlier, I get into this little meditation zone, not to be too zen-y here, and I forget I have a camera. I go, oh my God. And then someone will say, did you take a photo? Oh yeah, I have a camera.
I've done that.
So that does happen often. And the other thing is, the other day we were looking for, I think it was the Lucy warbler and the yellow warbler, and which is in a crazy place right next to the highway and the trains and all, but it stays there. People who were there, who we never met before, was so helpful. And that feels so good, as we're talking about these days where people are kind of a little edgy and they really went out of their way and we didn't know them. It's over here, come this way, and showed us where it was. And I just find that in birding it feels good to have that happen.
So glad you said that, Tom, because I think I've never met a more generous group than birders. I have had experience after experience around the world where people have kind of like scooped me up and said, oh, I see that you're birding. Let me show you this. That happened to me the very first time I went to Central Park. It was spring and I was in Central Park with binoculars, and like 4 hours later, I emerged from the park. Like people were just taking me all over and showing me all the specialties. And I have found that over and over again. And it is really one of the wonderful things about the birding community, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for me, the drive to add to my year list for the last few years, the real benefit I've had from that, the biggest benefit I've had from that is not, the numbers or the check marks. It's in chasing some of these rarities, I end up being around really good birders who are there chasing the same bird. And we have these little, gatherings, and I've come to know these people and learn a tremendous amount from them. And it's just a fun community. It's just neat to be part of it and see these people again and be able to chat with them. And sometimes it gets in the way of the birding, but it's still fun to chat.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to wrap things up, but I really appreciate, again, Rebecca, you taking all this time to talk with us and share your love of the activity and your knowledge. And I want to remind everyone, we have an outing coming up. It won't be this Saturday, which was the original plan. It will be the following Saturday, so January 29th. We'll be meeting at 8 a.m. at the Bayard Avenue parking at the Carpinteria Bluffs, and we'll probably do the same route we did the last time we did the Bluffs. We'll kind of wander down to where the seal overlook is. So, you know, you don't have to attend, but anyone who wants to attend, it'd be great to see you there. And I want to thank everybody again for being part of these meetings, and I hope we have a great 2022, and maybe we'll be able to get together in person at some point and kind of move on from the Zoom experience. But for now, it does do a lot for me to be able to get together with everyone and see you all, at least virtually.
I hope to see everybody out there at the next irresistible chase.
Yeah, go find a good bird.
Having that sound one at the garden would be really nice.
Yeah, I don't know what its form is going to be yet, but I'm looking forward to it. They asked me if I would do something like that, so I was happy to jump in. That would be fun.
Would you be announcing it like on the SBCO birding mailing list, or where would someone go to see information about it?
Botanic Garden website.
Okay.
I don't know even when it's going to be yet, but just pay attention to their upcoming events or coming classes or whatever. It'll be on that.
All right. Well, thanks again. Any final thoughts from anybody? Here's your chance.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. John. Thank you very much.
Great to see all of you.
All right. I'll see you all out there. So long.